Hiya, pals! Welcome to the Mouse Bytes podcast! Let's go!
Hello, and welcome to the Mouse Bytes podcast, a show all about Disney video games, past and present. Welcome to episode 3. I am your host, Jeph, and today I am joined by Clay.
Clayton.
Clayton?
Clayton. Not Clayton.
And in case you didn't see the title of the episode today, we are covering Disney's Tarzan, which came out on the Nintendo 64, Sony PlayStation, Microsoft Windows, and Game Boy Color. That was over the course of 1999 and the N64 version in 2000. So we'll jump right into things. First off, our usual segment, What the Heck is this game? So, as mentioned before, this game did come out on the N64, PlayStation, Windows, and Game Boy Color. The three first ones, the N64, PlayStation, and Windows, are basically the same game with minor differences, and then the Game Boy version is, as usual at the time, a little bit different than the others. It was developed by Eurocom, a British studio that I know was pretty prominent in the era. I was not super familiar with their games, although I know they did end up getting the 007 license at one point.
Yeah,
don't know a whole lot what else they did. Do you know any of their other work?
I do. They did Duke Nukem 64. They did
nice.
Disney's Hercules for the PlayStation.
Okay.
Which is one I would like to do on here at some point. They did Maui Mallard and Cold Shadow. Which is that Donald Duck game for the Super Nintendo that has a super weird title. They've done The Jungle Book. I'm just mentioning Earthworm Jim was one. They've done.
They had a great portfolio and a good tie to Disney. It looks like.
Yep. Yeah, and then like you mentioned, they did a lot of the GoldenEye 007 for like Wii and PlayStation 3 later on.
Some of the spin-offs.
Yeah. So.
Okay, yeah, and then this game for the N64 was published by Activision. For the PlayStation, Sony went ahead and published it. And then I think we found out that Konami ended up publishing or distributing it in Japan.
Correct.
Do we know which system? Was that for the N64 version, or was that for all versions? Do you know?
I don't. That's a good question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just know that Konami did assist in distribution in Japan.
Yes.
Anything else about what this game is? I guess we should talk about the genre a little bit.
Yes.
It is primarily, I would say, a 2.5D platformer, but it does have a couple of, I would say, Crash Bandicoot-style 3D levels, and then one semi-free roaming, but not really level. We can kind of talk about that later on, if you know which one I'm talking about.
Yep.
What else? Anything else about this game that you can think of, or shall we move?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of got some side scroller to it. You know, the majority of them are kind of, a side view, I guess. And so, but, we're not working with 2D sprites here. These are, I think almost all of it is, 3D models. So,
yep, I think so.
Yeah. So I think that's about it. That's what the game is.
Yep. All right, well, from there, we'll jump over to our initial thoughts and prior experiences. All right, so for myself, I had no prior experience with this game, and the only thing I really knew about it was from, I think it was on the cover of like February 2000's Nintendo Power or something like that, somewhere around there. And that is pretty much my extent of seeing it. I think I maybe thumbed through that little. There's probably a mini guide and preview.
Right.
What about you? What was your
prior
experience?
Me and this game go back a bit further. I didn't own this game as a child, but my cousins did, and so I remember going over to their house and basically playing it there. And I just remember being in love with it. I imagine it was somewhere close to when the movie had come out. If not a little, it had to have been like at least a year later. But and I just remember thinking it was the coolest thing. I loved the movie, big fan as a kid, and so it was always one of those games I wish we had on the N64, but we didn't. And so anytime we were over there, I would try to play it for a while, and so always had fond memories of it. And then I don't know, a couple years back probably, I ended up finally picking it up on the N64, and that was really the only version I ever played of it until this week. I did go out and spent $5 and got it for the PlayStation just to kind of see, what's different, what's similar about it. So it was interesting, and it was fun to kind of play the two and kind of compare them. So that's my prior experience.
Okay, cool. As far as initial thoughts go, I guess you kind of explain those in there. It's what happened when you first played it and that you liked it. For me, it was an interesting initial thought. It was kind of like, well, what am I getting into here? And from a modern gaming perspective with no prior experience with the game, it was a little interesting with the controls on the platforming aspect. And I don't know how to fully explain it because it doesn't control poorly, I don't think. And I don't, and we'll get into this a little bit later on, I think. But I think what was really throwing me for a loop is some of the lack of transitional animations. And I understand that a lot of that is just a constriction of the hardware at the time. So overall, I really liked the presentation of it. I liked the experience. I liked the variety of the levels, and it was a good little platformer, I'd say, for what it is. So yeah, from there we might as well just jump right into the game discussion itself. And within the game discussion, we will go over the look of the game, how the sound and music hold out, some gameplay, a little more in depth, and the story, if there's any story involved, which this one does have some story ties since it's a movie one. So we'll start off with the look. I'm stumbling today.
You're good.
So the look of the game, just to kick it right off, it is both good and bad. Some of the character models, they're all 3D modeled characters, which I think is great. Some of them are kind of low poly because the camera, low polygon. The camera zoomed out pretty far for the most part, although there's times where it zooms in a little bit.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
A lot of it. I was gonna say there's some parts where I'm like, why is this so zoomed in? Back it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a few. There's definitely a few parts. And then like on the loading screen from save, or maybe just the save screen and loading screen, you have a 3D model of Jane that's very large on screen and it doesn't look spectacular.
She looks rough.
Yeah. They did well for what the hardware would allow, but it really has not aged super well. Let's see. As far as the environments go, the first several are pretty just green and kind of bland. And they just have like there's not much of a depth of field or whatever. I guess the closest thing you could compare these type of 2.5D levels to is like the Donkey Kong Country Return style. I don't know if there's anything else as mainstream as that that's similar, but like New Super Mario Brothers, kind of. But the background is just a flat painting.
Yeah.
And the first one really isn't that good, in my opinion. It's just very bland. There's one a little bit further into the game that's got like waterfalls and stuff that I think looks a lot better.
Heck yeah.
And several others that are just, varying degree of quality. But the very first level is your young Tarzan with young Tarzan's model. Is a little just overly green and simplistic, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's pretty basic, but for first level though, it's to be expected, I would say.
Yeah. And then as far as the UI, I only played the N64 version, so I don't know if it varies between systems, but the UI, you've got kind of a health meter and a life counter, I think, on the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, they're like vines.
This icon of Tarzan's face, which I think is unnecessary, and it's like spinning. And I don't know, it should have just been like a 2D sprite or just not there, because like you can tell what your health is. I don't know. Interesting choice. It obstructs like the lower maybe eighth of the screen, so...
Yeah. They could have probably done a better job with it. And there's like a number with how many lives you have over some leaves. And it's just, I don't know if it's all necessary. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a staple of its era. And low resolution on a smaller TV means they had to make it a little bit bigger for it to be readable / usable to the player. So other than that, I mean... I think the presentation is really strong as far as the menus and the font in level as you're picking up these collectible letters, which was a staple of Activision at the time, which is just reminds me of Tony Hawk. And there's some worlds that are kind of vine grinding that it kind of reminded me of Tony Hawk slightly, which the movie did at the time it came out. I mean, it came out, I guess, right around the time that Tony Hawk came out. And if anyone hasn't played those games, it's a skateboarding game that came out the same year. So, I don't know. Presentation-wise, did you think it did well with the fonts and art interface and stuff?
Yeah,
like
it kind of did the same thing that Bug's Life did, where it had these yellow fonts for each level at the beginning with like a still image from the movie over top of it. But I think the font looks like so much better than...
It's a much more interesting font than that kind of plain one they used, right?
Right, and they did like a drop shadow on this, so it just it sits in the picture a little bit better, and they purposely picked pictures that have kind of a lower, area where you could put it, and it doesn't... It's not like covering up things. So on that end, it wasn't terrible. The main menu kind of has this chalkboard feel to it, which works fine, despite those rough character models that kind of look bad in both versions. But I totally agree with what you're saying about like the heads-up display, how you got all these things you don't necessarily need. Luckily, the fruits kind of only show up when you collect them or when you switch between them, and so I think that keeps some of the clutter off. Same with like the tokens you collect and stuff. I agree, the backdrops are a little weird. I don't think I even really noticed it at first. It wasn't until I hit that waterfall looking level that I first kind of realized it, and thought it was kind of weird, but overall that didn't really bother me. Visually, I wasn't seeing a lot of differences between the PlayStation and the N64. In fact, I think some of the textures maybe looked a little better on the N64, but it's hard to say. Even after putting one in and then playing the other, they still look pretty similar. There's some other differences outside of kind of the visual, aspects of it all, but yeah, I think overall this game looked pretty good. I think the kind of the walk animation for Tarzan is a little bizarre.
Well, I think that kind of relates to what I was saying at the beginning about how there's no animation transitions. So it's like he only has one single walk animation. They just play it, if he's moving or not moving.
Right.
And I think without having like a gradual kind of easing into it and easing out of it with like a trot or any sort of gallop at full speed, it does look kind of weird in my opinion.
Yeah, but it's probably not the easiest.
I think that's why.
Right. And that makes sense. It's just not the easiest walking animation to do, I'm sure. It's a dude on all fours walking like a monkey, so it's probably not easy.
The limitations of these older systems, maybe not the PlayStation, but to get it to literally save the animation files to an N64 cartridge. I know only from just interview with Shigeru Miyamoto, the designer of Mario and Zelda. He was talking about going from Ocarina of Time to Wind Waker and how many more animations they could do just moving to a disc-based system. So I'm wondering if it was kind of lowest common denominator or just maybe just lack of time, because movie tie-ins tended to get rushed. Or maybe a combination of the both. Because, there's several other games where the animations aren't quite as weird as far as their playback and transition. I think this one just lacked that extra bit of polish.
Yeah.
Personally.
No, I totally agree. But yeah, overall, like in the game visually, I don't think it's a terrible looking game. I think there's a lot going on the screen at one time. There's birds flying everywhere. There's monkeys throwing fruit at you. Gameplay wise, that can be a little overwhelming at times, but there's like itty bitty little frogs that annoyed the heck out of me.
Yes.
And I don't know. It's just it felt like a busy jungle, and So as far as that goes, I think that they did that well. Obviously, there's multiple planes of, I don't know what it is. Like there's the forward plane. There's like kind of a back. Sometimes you can go off, your normal path or whatever. I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but
it's the half D and 2.5D,
right,
where you can kind of come into the foreground and loop around, and the camera will pull out and go full 3D, which is weird. But there's areas that you can see where you can do that, and it's kind of cool. Yeah,
and I just think that gives some good depth. And if there's like bad guys on different parts of the area, I just think it looks really cool. There's stuff closer to you. There's birds further away sometimes, and I don't know. I just think they did that pretty well.
I would agree, and I would say that the level design in that regard, and this may overlap into gameplay, but as far as graphically making it look interesting, the different layers and depths and kind of overlapping branches and things like that, it really adds to the atmosphere, I think, and makes it look a lot more filled in than it could have. Like they could have just done a flat 2D, plane, and I think they did a good job with the variety with that.
Definitely.
So, as far as art style and how it holds up to its source material, I would say that overall it looks similar to the art direction of the film. It definitely evokes the same feeling looking at it. Obviously, like we mentioned before, limitations of the system kind of keeps it from looking, verbatim like the film.
Right.
Whereas, we talked about in the Little Mermaid episode last week, there was obviously the 8-bit limitation, but then like the previous week we had the 16-bit, or the month, I keep saying week, month, like the 16-bit look of the different Mickey eras looked a lot more faithful to those, just because they were, 2D sprite based. So moving into the first generation polygonal, 32-bit, 64-bit systems, I think took its toll as far as games looking like their source material. Again, another example that we haven't gotten to on the show yet, but would be like Aladdin looks just like the movie. So, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, I guess, moving into the 3D era.
Right.
Would you agree art style looks right, but quality of, the polygon count and things like that, maybe not up to snuff?
Yeah. There's not really a whole lot of detail in Tarzan's face. And so it's a bit blocky. But like, his hair kind of like flows in the wind and stuff. So there are some nice little details, but I agree. Yeah, definitely. There's a lot left to be desired at times. Yeah. Visually, when you kind of look at the details of everything, but I don't think it's overly distracting, and I don't think that's what you're saying. So yeah,
I'd say overall it looks good. It's just maybe it looks like an early 3D game.
Right.
So, anything else with the way the game looks, or would you want to move on to sound and music?
Just last thing, as most games are, PlayStation version, the textures are very pixelated, whereas the N64 has a much smoother, but also kind of blurry, effect. So that, I guess, is worth mentioning. Other than that, yeah, no, I think I think that's it. I just wanted to clear that up because I'm looking at them both right now and just trying to see if there was anything else I missed. But really, other than that, they kind of look the same. So,
yeah, cool. All right, well, with that, we'll jump on into the sound and music of the game. Basically, going over if the music matches the source material, in this case the movie, the sound design, same thing, and then anything else relating to that. So let's start with music. The game has a good mixture, in my opinion, of both original compositions and MIDI song representations of the music from the movie. Faithfully done, but definitely sounding a little emulate. I don't know what the right term is for how you analyze a good MIDI track, but some of the instrument choices are a little fake sounding, I guess.
Yeah, it's tough because I feel like when you're doing the instrumental part of the song, it sounds almost, it sounds pretty similar, but then when you all of a sudden have to take Phil Collins' voice out of it and pick instruments to do that main melody,
that's probably what it is.
That's where it gets difficult, because like, what do you put there that's gonna sound as good as the blessed Phil Collins voice, and it's just nothing. So
that's probably the best way to describe it.
But I totally agree.
You nailed it.
Like when the drums come in on the opening song, it's like, all right, this sounds pretty similar actually, and then all of a sudden it's working. Yeah, exactly. And you're like, ooh.
I was noticing in like the Trash in the Camp level, the beginning was like perfect, spot on. Right? It almost sounded like it was straight off of the soundtrack. And then all of a sudden, when the melody kicked in, it was like, ooh. Dude,
I was totally going to bring that up, because at first I was like, okay, dude, this sounds exactly like...
I thought they were sampling MP3. I was like, maybe they decided to just dedicate, because this is the most popular song from the soundtrack, or one of them.
Right.
It's a great soundtrack. I don't know if that is the most popular one. I felt like it was pretty popular at the time. But yeah, once the melody kicked in with MIDI, I was like, oh, well, they tried.
Yeah. So close. And yet...
Yeah. But the drums and the percussion at the beginning and some of the weird sound effects, I think they got the samples that Phil Collins used for his song and got those to work in MIDI, which sounded great. And then all of a sudden the melody was a little off. But
yeah.
Oh, well, the fake trumpet is hard to do. It's one of the most difficult ones to MIDI-ize.
Definitely.
So, and as far as the original compositions, like the very first level, it reminded me a lot of the Kingdom Hearts Tarzan music.
Dude, I actually said that verbatim when I was playing it. I was like...
I said it out loud to myself.
We're so on the same page here. This is great.
Yeah, we are. Yep. So I appreciated it, and it was well done. And something that I think is underappreciated but works very well in video game music to keep it from getting stale is like key changes. In this one, the loop is just right, in my opinion, that there's a key change to kind of keep it sounding fresh and not as monotonous. I don't know if that makes sense or if you even know what I'm talking about, but
yeah,
I like the original compositions in this game almost as much as the Phil Collins music. I think I have more nostalgic ties to the real songs, quote unquote real songs, the songs from the movie.
Right.
But I didn't dislike any of the original compositions.
No, I totally agree. In fact, I think they got a little bit stronger as the game went on. The first level one is like all right, and then I think they got a little bit better. But
yeah.
No, and I know I keep bringing up Bug's Life, but man, like the original songs they wrote in the Bug's Life game, I think are just awful and don't fit well at all. And I feel like these actually fit. They feel like jungle songs. They feel like they could have been a part, of the original soundtrack. And so I just think they fit the original source material so much better. And I know that's something that we're constantly, comparing against. And so I think for this, I think they did a pretty great job with it, despite the rough midis at times. So,
yep, I totally agree with that. And just for anyone listening, if you don't know what Bug's Life episode Clay's referencing, it is from Strictly 64. Him and Kay from Kay and Clay, our host, they did an episode on that. So not officially a Mouse Bytes one as of now, but kind of fits in.
Well, I feel like I've brought up Bug's Life on the show already.
I think we
too,
have, but
so.
this could be someone's first.
Fair
I don't
enough.
know.
Fair enough. But yeah, I can't stop talking about that game for some reason.
I mean, it left a lasting impression.
Clearly.
It's something. Not in the right way, though.
All right.
Anything else with music, or are you ready to jump into sound real quick?
Yeah, I mean, Phil.
I think we've covered it.
Yeah, Phil Collins is awesome.
Totally. As far as the sound design goes, I will say that they needed more voice samples. It's interesting. They got real voice samples for sound effects and grunts and stuff from Tarzan, and then they had like full voice acting from Turk in the tutorial in the first level, and then kind of bleeds into the second level. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But Tarzan's like when he jumps and does stuff is very redundant. He has like 2 sound effects, both as young and old. And then he does his when he vine swings, which is cool, but again redundant if you've got 2 vines in a row.
Clayton.
The fruit sounds.
Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Clayton has a lot of lines at the end.
Yeah.
I feel like that most of the voice acting is between him and Turk. They kind of take the spotlight. I guess Jane's got some lines in like the menus and stuff, but now typically with PlayStation, they usually have a lot more lines, got a lot more space for that kind of stuff, and usually N64 has less. But I felt like they kind of actually had the same amount, and I might be wrong, but it wasn't noticeably more, and so
I didn't check.
No, it's fine.
So I don't have
that's why I did it, just so somebody could check. But
totally,
because usually it's like noticeably more, and it's usually really annoying. But it seems like for the
higher quality,
right? Yeah, that definitely that. But it seems like on the N64 they were able to keep most of it and didn't really have to lose any of it, as far as I can tell. Minus the full, video. Sections or whatever, and we should probably talk about that now, I guess, because we're kind of at that point.
Totally.
Yeah. So obviously, in the PlayStation version, you get, literally when you boot it up on the PlayStation version, you jump right into, it's basically like this trailer from the movie with the actual Phil Collins song.
Nice.
Which, honestly, it looks pretty darn good. It's a little darker, and obviously it's a little pixelated, but still, it's like right up there with, I don't know, I would say maybe like VHS quality, but and so it's got full chunks from the movie, voice acting, whereas you boot the N64 one up and it just kicks you to the main title screen immediately. So I don't know, just right off the bat, like just watching this video, you pretty much see a gist of the entire Tarzan movie.
Interesting.
And Phil Collins is just singing in your ear holes, and so right off the bat, you're just stoked to play this game because you're like, yeah, that was so epic. Which maybe hurts it or helps it, I don't know.
To have that and then to go to like the lower quality PlayStation graphics may have hurt it. I don't know.
Yeah.
And the midis. But that's cool. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So.
And then literally each level in between, you get a scene that kind of sets up the level. And so
that must be nice.
Yeah, it's pretty freaking cool. Unfortunately, N64 didn't get any of that.
No.
And as you play through the game, as you collect all the Tarzan letters, you unlock additional movie clips that aren't, I guess, part of the storyline or whatever. Whereas in the N64 one, you unlock what are they called? Character screens.
Which story screens or something like that.
Yeah, it's just like super boring and not very cool. Story screens. You're right, story screens. So the last thing I wanted to say on this that I thought was interesting is at the beginning, before the first level, they have the whole scene where Tarzan runs into Kerchak, and then Turk shows up, and it's not Rosie O'Donnell.
Which
Which
it's weird.
I understand why it's not her in game, because obviously they probably couldn't get her to do it, or she didn't want to do it.
Right.
So apparently they then had to go and dub this voice actor in all of the scenes that Turk is in, which is quite a bit. I mean, right before the elephant hair level, they do that whole thing. And I mean, they lined it up pretty well, actually. I was kind of impressed.
That's good.
You couldn't really tell that it was like somebody else dubbing it, but it definitely caught me off guard, because I just assumed they would pull it straight from the movie, and you'd hear Rosie O'Donnell, and then when she got into the game, it would be, the voice actor or whatever.
Interesting.
But no, they retrofitted that voice actor into it. Clayton sounded in game like the actual actor, so I wonder if that was actually him. They got for the
I would guess
perhaps.
most of them. Yeah, I would guess most of them stayed the same, because Rosie O'Donnell was like the big name tied to the movie, other than Phil Collins. But and I'm sure she either had something in her contract about royalties, or just didn't have the time to do the extra voice and they wanted it to match.
It's one or the other. Yep, totally.
So, it is what it is, and the N64 one obviously doesn't have that same problem, but definitely doesn't have Rosie O'Donnell in game, like you were saying.
Yes.
So, it works. Her voice, whoever did do it, it's not terrible.
No.
I've heard far worse imitators in video games, so
definitely
it works just fine. And it's not like she has a ton of speaking roles. She kind of just does the tutorial at the beginning, as far as I remember. But
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Tom Hanks' brother who does the voice.
Interesting.
I'm kidding. Do you not get the joke?
I know that he does Woody in all the video games.
Okay.
I was like, are they pitching him up? I didn't know where you were going with that. I was like, I'm not going to argue because I have no idea. But
no,
it's a very girly New Yorker sound.
No, I was totally kidding. Maybe it's Rosie O'Donnell's sister.
Famously, Tom Hanks' brother does Woody's voice for all the merchandise in video games.
Yes, I think it's
just so that he can share.
And the spotlight,
the glory. Yeah.
I think the voice actor is Josie O'Donnell. Josie. Yeah. So take that with you.
Is interesting. Is it
Rosie's sister, Josie?
Okay.
No, it's not. I'm sorry. I'm still messing with you.
I can't tell if you're messing with me or not.
I know.
It's Josie O'Connell. What?
O'Connell.
A different last name. All right. So somebody impersonates Rosie O'Donnell and does a decent job.
Yeah. There's some jungle sounds. There's some animal sounds. There's like some monkeys.
Yeah. One thing I noticed. Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay. One thing I noticed in that waterfall level, that there was some decent sound design where as you approached a waterfall, it kind of like grew in ambient noise. Like, it was just an added effect that I don't think was really necessary, but it like kind of was quiet as you approached it and then was roaring as you went over it. I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah.
As far as the ambience goes, and it was pretty cool.
No, that's cool. You love your water effects, so it's hard
I will
to
mention water and
get
everything.
one past you. So true.
Yeah. So, what other sound designs are there? There's just various video game sound effects for like bouncing off of things, and
I know one that's pretty awful.
Okay.
Little Tarzan, when he pounds on the ground and you just hold it down.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do that at all?
I didn't.
Oh, he just like screams bloody murder. It sounds like you're like pounding his head into the ground. He's just like
that's terrifying.
Yeah, I played
funny.
it and my roommate was like, dude, that is weird. And I was like, yeah, he's pretty crazy. Little Tarzan.
A little wild Tarzan, yeah.
But other than that, I think we kind of covered most of the voice acting, and I didn't mind Little Tarzan. I thought his voice was kind of cute and didn't really bother me. Older Tarzan was a bit quieter, obviously, in the movie, so he didn't say as much,
right.
But at least in my opinion. But
yeah.
So, oh well. But you're right. They probably could have done with more lines. Things did get a little repetitive.
Yeah, especially for the little short things like that, or it wasn't a full line of dialogue. I feel like they should have budgeted the space for that. But, oh well, I mean, who knows? They obviously were trying to fit within the N64 constrictions, because obviously that's the lowest common denominator among cartridge and disc space between PlayStation, Windows, and N64. So
yeah, it's
too bad. Yeah, so From there, we can jump over into gameplay, including difficulty and just other elements of gameplay. So I kind of touched on the controls earlier, that they work well, especially the platforming ones, but they're, you've got mid-air control where if you jump and kind of push the opposite direction, you can defy physics and do that, and the animation just kind of, there's no transitional animation for that, so you just kind of jerk back and forth. But
so what's your issue then? I don't get it.
It works fine. It plays fine. Just looks weird. Yeah, it's, there's, I don't know, it's not as finely tuned as maybe some other platformers. And, you always compare to like Mario that has such a very refined momentum engine, I guess. And this one, I don't feel like there's a whole lot of momentum. It's kind of just, you control it and you move. But I don't know.
I hate when that happens.
Shut up.
No, I know what you mean though. Like if you say you bounce on like the elephant's back, and you're trying to stay on him, you like when you cut back, you just like either overshoot.
It's a little jerky. Yeah.
I agree. I get that, but
it lacks the finesse, but it works well. It's adequate, I guess, is how I would say it is.
You know what sucks is the vine swinging mechanic.
Yeah, I really don't like that. You can't like climb up and then swing from a higher place, and
well, you can. You just have to completely stop swinging, climb up, and then start again. But it's
okay.
Rough.
I couldn't even get it to start again when I was doing that, so that's interesting. I just was failing.
You have to hit over twice in the same direction to get it to start, like over,
see,
which
I didn't ever
is not intuitive at all.
No, not at all. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there's some interesting gameplay problems. As far as it tackling multiple gameplay stails, there's seems to be a classic in Disney games, but running away from the camera from a stampede or a stampeding animal seems to be a staple. And so like in the first one, the elephant stampede, you're just running away from that, and it's very similar to The Lion King or Mickey Mania. I thought it was cool how you can kind of go up on the side and the camera would kind of pan sideways a little bit. And just little things that they didn't have to do that kind of added to it.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of groundbreaking. I mean, you collect all the same things that you collect in the 2D levels, but just as you just have to knee-jerk respond. Kind of like if you see something, you have to jump up and get it, or have jumped early enough to get onto a log to jump up high enough to get it, things like that. So... you memorize it. Something as far as gameplay goes is if you do die, there's little butterflies that you activate throughout the levels, and those are like spawn points. Anything you've collected, you keep, which is great.
Yes.
Because you think of games like Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. If you've collected something and you die and go back to the checkpoint, you have to collect it again. So this one is forgiving in that regard, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess I didn't even realize that, but you're totally right. That's definitely a thing. And that's very welcome for sure.
Totally. One thing I didn't like is kind of a tonal thing. And this is just, I think the designers not knowing what to do to make the game a game and relying too much on a formulaic approach, is that you're literally Tarzan going around murdering little innocent, like, kittens, literally lynx kittens or bobcat kittens.
Yeah.
Lemurs. I mean, you straight up collect a like a spear or a half spear as a kid,
right?
And you literally murder these animals. At other points, you throw fruit at them and they disappear, and you could say, "Well, I just knocked them out." But if you're up in the top of a tree and you knock a monkey out, he's gonna fall and die. So I don't know. I didn't really like the idea of that. Like, why are those the enemies? But then it's like, if you're the game designer, what else could you put as an enemy,
right?
Other than tree branches swinging. Which
well,
is kind of
some of the bad guys were those baboons, and they were pretty evil. And
those ones were. That's true.
But even in The Little Mermaid from our last episode, they were even smart enough to make the fish evil, so that Ariel wasn't going around killing fish for no reason.
Right.
And even then, she wasn't really killing them. I think she was just bubbling them. But yeah, you're right. You can literally shank and slice and dice little animals and
little monkeys and lemurs and wild cats.
Yeah, I guess I never thought about it, but you're totally right. It's
it felt weird to me. And, whatever. And then there's like birds that attack you. And it's just, you think of Tarzan as like he's the friend of the animals. And, you think of when he shows Jane the lovebird nest. And it's just like, in general, other than the baboon scene in the movie, he was pretty friendly to most animals.
Right.
So, oh well.
No, that's a great point. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, they probably could have tried to figure
I feel like they could have done
around
something, but
Clayton could have controlled all the animals and made them evil, and Tarzan could throw bubbles at them.
Yeah. The fruit throwing maybe would have been just the better thing to stick to.
Yeah, get rid of the spear. Oh, I didn't even use it. Like I barely.
I
even
didn't either. I don't know why it was there.
Yeah, I thought it was cool as a kid. Like, oh, this is cool, but never used it.
So speaking of gameplay elements, the fruits. I don't have the instruction manual. I know you said you picked up the PlayStation one.
Yes.
What do the different fruit colors mean? You collect them randomly, and then you have one. I think that's just infinite.
Correct.
I could be wrong.
The yellow fruit is your standard power, which is infinite.
Yep.
Tarzan has an unlimited supply of these to throw. That's all it says. Next up is the purple fruit, which is the first level of increased power. This fruit has double the impact of the yellow fruit.
Okay.
So next up is the red fruit, which second level of increased power. This fruit splits to hit multiple enemies.
Ooh, splash damage.
Yes, it's basically the shotgun of this game, I guess.
Perfect.
And then the blue is the last one, the most powerful. This fruit blasts all the enemies in the vicinity.
Nice.
Interesting.
Okay. Well.
Yeah.
So there's that.
I never really switched between them. I was too lazy. Except for like on the bosses where I was struggling. I didn't really focus on them a whole lot. I just kind of, I just threw the yellows or whatever, try to run past them.
You cycle through them with like the R triggers or R buttons, and I think they show on screen as you cycle.
Correct.
But then
They
that
go away.
icon disappears. Yeah, which is appreciated since they're already taking up so much real estate at the bottom. So that's in, I think, the upper left corner.
Correct.
When it happens. So yeah, there's that element. Beyond the platforming, just general platforming that comes with the 2D platforming levels, and then the running away from the camera. There's also the surfer levels.
Yes.
Where you're on a tree and you just kind of lean one way or the other or duck.
Right.
And it's whatever. A little boring in my opinion. I feel like they could have done more with these.
Yeah. With me, I remember as a kid when I first played this game, I thought these were the coolest levels. I was like, yes.
Yeah, I thought they would build the whole game around it as a kid. Like I thought that's what the game would be.
Right.
Like extreme sports in the trees. Because there was like on the Disney Channel, they had a whole interview with Glenn Keane talking about how he animated those segments because his kid was into skateboarding. And I just felt like, oh, that'd be perfect for a video game. And, just.
Yeah. So I was
Tarzan's pro skater.
Yeah. I was like super. I remember loving it as a kid, but now when I went back, I was so stoked. I was like, this is going to be awesome. And then I started playing it. I was like, ooh, this isn't very good.
Yeah.
In fact, in one of the later levels, you're carrying Jane and you're getting chased by the baboons, and the camera angle is awful, dude.
It is, yeah.
You can't
I thought
see
it was so cool to go from like the stampede from the baboons, and then you transition and Tarzan picks you up, and then all of a sudden you have this like really crappy view.
Yeah, and they're coming at you, and you have to like open the umbrella, but you can't see when they're coming, and so that was unfortunate. That could have been a really, really cool level. Bit of a missed opportunity, if you ask me.
Totally.
But yeah, I died on the vine levels a couple times, but you kind of start to memorize it, and then it's not terrible.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning there's 3 difficulty levels in this. Obviously, you got your easy, medium, hard, and I think depending on which difficulty you beat it on, you get a different ending each time.
Okay.
Which I don't know what all 3 of those are, but yeah, it's kind of cool that there's some incentive there to play it on a higher difficulty. I'm man enough to admit that I only played this on easy, so zero shame here.
That's what I typically do for this kind of run through, just to try and experience it.
Yeah, no, I think that makes the most sense.
It's totally fine. Let's see, other gameplay elements, like I mentioned earlier, there's one level where you kind of get a little bit of free roaming 3D. It's on the on the deck of the ship. If you remember from the movie, the ship that comes and is supposed to pick up Jane and her father and Clayton, but ends up bringing the bad
guys.
Poachers, I guess.
Yeah.
So at some point you're on there, and the men that are on there are the enemies, and that makes a little more sense in relation to the movie. But you have a little bit of freedom in some places to 3D roam, and then occasionally you'll get yourself funneled into like a rope or a corridor type thing around the edge of the ship, and
that level
switches back to the 2.5D.
That level was such a disappointment, dude. Yeah. I thought it was lame, short, and just like I just didn't.
Yeah,
it felt so forced. I was like, what are we?
It was like, well, this is in the movie, we need to do it,
right?
But what can we do? And then it's just small and oh well. Aesthetically, at least, it looked like the ship from the movie. And then the final level, kind of another trope of these games apparently, is a spiraling tower to the top to fight a final boss, which we talked about in Mickey Mania.
Yes.
And not from a Disney game, but from Battletoads.
That's right.
So you run away from Clayton, and this is a really hard. I ended up having to watch this one. I tried playing it once and couldn't do it, but you have to time some jumps and some throws as animals come running down this spiral up a tree. I don't know. Did you play it, or did you do?
Yeah, I played it. I kept
did you beat it?
I did not. I got to the top of it, and then I would fight him, and then he just kept killing me.
His patterns are hard, yeah.
Yeah, and they're very quick, and there's not. There's barely any real pattern to it.
There's there's no consistency. He just randomly will switch between throwing knives, shooting a shotgun, and
there's like another knife arrow thing.
There's like a horizontal knife and then like a lob knife.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Yep. So it's really hard to time. It looks like I said, I didn't get to that myself, but just watching it. Yeah. So eventually you beat him by knocking him back enough to where he falls off, I guess, which he doesn't have a health bar. I guess you fight the
so stupid.
The leopard Sabor.
Yeah.
Mid game in kind of a fight him, go through platforming section, fight him again.
Yeah.
Thing where you can see his health dwindling and all that, and his attack patterns are pretty lame.
Yeah.
So it was a big spike in bosses to go from Sabor to Clayton, it looked like.
Definitely. Yeah, the only thing annoying about Sabor is there's like a hawk that is apparently friends with him.
What the heck?
They're like allies, and every time
he just goes back and forth, and you can't dodge right.
It's so annoying.
That's a cheap trick, in my opinion, because it's like you can't time how it's going to line up with them going back and forth, and you get stuck and have to take a forced hit. I don't like that in game design.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that covers most of the gameplay elements. You can collect 4 little monkey drawings to unlock bonus levels, and the bonus levels add in another level type, which is the water float thing. There's like a Tarzan and a Turk one.
Yes, right? And then there's one where you're Turk and you're on top of Tantor.
Yeah, with the fake clothes or whatever.
Right.
Jane's clothes.
And you're running from Kerchak, which is pretty great.
Yep.
Yeah.
So some good variety with the bonus levels, which I almost feel like they just should have been regular levels as far as contributing to the plot, but some of them are in parallel. For example, Tarzan bringing Jane to the flock. What do you call it? A herd? What do you call a group of gorillas?
I don't know. That's a great question.
But yeah, so there's some of them go in parallel, so I understand why it's a bonus stage.
Right.
So anyway, there's a good amount of them. Is it 1-to-1? Is there a bonus stage for every level?
Yeah.
Or pretty close to that.
Yeah, I guess there is.
So doubles the length of the game, really.
Yeah. So there's some good variety in there. Yeah, there's Stork Ride, Jungle Cruise.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Tree Surfing, Turk and Tantor's Great Escape, Jungle Jumpin', and then if you complete bonus levels is the same as completing levels, except that you cannot save bonus levels. Any tokens you collect will be added to the number of lives left. Collect the purple fruit to extend your time, basically. So
okay, so they're on a timer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a welcome little addition.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of cool, and it gives some variety. Disney's kind of known for having little bonus. Like, I think a Lion King had some cool bonus levels.
I feel like a lot of them do. Yeah.
So
Mickey Mania, I guess it was more on just the PlayStation version, wasn't it, that had the bonus?
Right. Yeah.
Or the Genesis one did.
Yeah.
I think the Genesis one did, and the Super Nintendo was like the most bare bones one, and that was the one I played.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so I think that covers gameplay for that point.
Yeah.
Blockbuster Brutal, not really. I wouldn't say. I'd say it's after the first level, pretty even keel as far as just some really weird enemy placement, like the frogs and monkeys and stuff, where you just end up jumping into them on accident.
Stupid frogs.
It's really not brutally hard. It's just learning it. And
yeah, and
your worst enemy is the lives.
Right. And I still I feel like they're pretty generous with where they place you when you do die.
Yeah.
Like the checkpoints are pretty generous, I would say.
Agreed. Yeah.
So, yeah, I wouldn't say Blockbuster Brutal at all, for sure.
No.
So
yeah, from there we'll jump into the story, which I think we've kind of just covered throughout talking about it. You've got on the PlayStation, probably the Windows version, the story clips that help tie it together, and then you play a level that represents something from the game.
Yep.
The N64 one is much more reduced and doesn't make as much sense. Like, you go from a young Tarzan level to a grown Tarzan level, just like snap of a finger.
Yeah.
I kind of wish they would have done a level where you're playing as young Tarzan and then maybe go behind a tree or something. That, I mean, if you think about the transition in the movies, it's like he jumps into the air and then he spins and he like literally transforms from a boy to a man.
Right.
Like, they couldn't have probably done that on the N64 / PlayStation, but like have him go behind a tree and just swap out the character model or something. I don't know.
Yeah, because
just to make that transition happen while playing Son of Man, which they have playing in the level.
Right.
The first level is a man. They don't have it playing in the level as a boy. So,
well,
which is too bad.
The level's even literally called Coming of Age.
Yeah.
But then at the end,
so it should have.
Yeah, they should have done something, because in the PlayStation version, you get that whole video montage at the end of it with, the song, and then it shows that clip where he goes up in the air and comes down, older or whatever.
That's kind of weird, because like you play that whole level as an adult, so then the clip plays afterwards.
Maybe it's before it,
or maybe it leads into it.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe if it's before it, that would make sense, because you'd go from the last child level to the first.
That's probably what
man
it is.
Level.
Yeah.
That probably makes a lot more sense in context too. So, I mean, that's great in that regard. It's too bad they couldn't do that on the N64, or even just show that transition in like a series of 3 still images or something.
Yeah, a lot of N64 games did that, where they would just
totally.
So
yeah,
bummer.
Super bummer. But otherwise, I mean, it stays very true to the source material. I mean, I don't think they took a whole lot of what would you call it? Liberties. Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's, as far as extending a level or just making up him running through the jungle, okay, yeah. But, and trashing the camp and stuff like that. But in general, it's just they hit most of the beats from the movie and stick to it.
Yep. No, I totally agree. It's way less confusing than the Little Mermaid storyline. So
yeah, that one just was. Yep. So yeah, I'd say from that we've kind of covered the whole game. Is there anything else you kind of wanted to go over?
Couple little things. In trashing the camp, you do get to play as Turk, which is kind of cool.
Right. Yep.
That's a nice little change of pace. She doesn't really have any, or is it he? I don't remember.
It's a she.
She doesn't really have any different abilities that Tarzan doesn't really have or does have. So
yeah,
that doesn't
same moveset.
Yeah, so I mean it's cool, but it really doesn't feel that much different.
I liked the monkey catapults in that level. That was a nice new mechanic.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
But not different. It wasn't a different like moveset. It was just like you stood on a board and a monkey would be kind of in the dimension behind you, and then as soon as you stood on the board, it would jump and launch you, which was really cool.
Yeah. Other than that, I think we kind of covered it all. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we did. So, closing thoughts?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So basically, I would say this is a fun multi-genre platformer game, mostly platforming. It's a product of its era. It's a little rough to look at times, but not overall bad. I think it's great for what it is. I enjoyed it. It's a little tough here and there, and that's why, like we said, we played it on easy and didn't beat some levels and skip some levels. Personally, I don't know about you if you were able to play every single level, but overall, I'd recommend it. I would say it's a good movie tie-in. It's not a bad game.
Nice. Yeah, this game has a special place in my heart, and in fact, I wanted to review this on my N64 show, and it just never found its place, and I was very upset, and kind of threw a little kitty fit, and Kay was nice enough to remind me that I have a Disney podcast, and I was like, cool, I'm just gonna do it on there then. So
Perfect.
here we are, and so I'm happy to finally be able to talk about this, and yeah, and so I still love this game. I think a lot of it is just kind of in the nostalgia area.
Yeah.
I have good memories with it. I still think it's a fun game. I don't think it's aged as well as I remember it, especially like those surfing levels. I think the front half of this game is a little bit better than the back half.
Okay.
But there's a lot more variety in the back half. So it's kind of like a win-lose kind of scenario thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think there was a lot more potential for the back half to be even better. But I just think some of the things didn't translate well. Like there was one level when I was an adult. It's like the only one where you actually are following Tarzan from behind. I don't know if you saw that one. And I got to a part where I hit like this invisible wall and I did not know what to do. And there were these bad guys just throwing barrels at me, and I just kept dying. And finally I was just like, forget this level, dude. I'm moving on. So there's a little frustrating parts here and there, but I think this game has a lot of character. I think it's a good representation of the movie. Like you said, it's a good movie to video game version. And yeah, if you're a fan of the movie at all, I recommend this game. I would definitely pick up the PlayStation version, and saying that hurts me because I love the N64 so much. But having those movie clips just makes it so much more of a better experience. And the gameplay that we'll be showing in this movie, or on the YouTube version of this episode, will have both. I recorded some of the PlayStation and the N64.
Nice.
So you get to see some of both. But yeah, I would definitely, if you can, like I said, I spent $5 and got it. And yeah, just to have those movie clips and hear some of the actual music from the original soundtrack, I think makes it just a much more enjoyable experience. But it's also super cheap on the N64, so find it on there. It's still worth picking up. So I like this game. It has a good place in my heart. It's not the most amazing game, and I think I brought it down a few, letter grades just playing it recently.
Yeah.
But I still had a fun time with it. It wasn't grueling. I think we've yet to play a awful, horrible game. And maybe we'll get to that eventually.
I'm sure we will.
But yeah, no, I still like this game, and I'm glad we got to discuss it here on the show. So thanks for doing this, man.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we did this one. And something I meant to say at the top of the show that I didn't was that it was kind of some poetic justice that we did the movie that released exactly 10 years after The Little Mermaid. Since we did The Little Mermaid last month.
Yeah.
Because that was the 89 movie. This is the 99 movie. So that means next month we're going to do The Princess and the Frog.
No.
Which apparently I had to look up. There's a Wii game. So
what?
Maybe down the road when we are desperate. But yeah, I don't think we've decided yet on next month's game.
Yeah.
So just
we kind of hit all of the main generations. I mean, we could move on to the GameCube, Xbox era next month.
Yeah.
But we probably won't do that. We might kind of move backwards again, but
yeah, I think we might go back to side scroller.
So in case you've been like following us and trying to figure out what pattern we're on, we don't really know, and there is no pattern. So who knows what next month will be, but hopefully it'll be a good one. So
yeah. But with that, we thank you all for joining us. As always, you can find our other sister shows on kandclay.com. There's Strictly 64, as well as is Switch Talk on there? Or is that just the one that we contribute to?
It is on there. It's like a sister show kind of thing.
Okay. Yep. As well as the Logcast with Rare and Friends. So we've got a whole network of shows going at this point. We ask that you check them all out if you're interested. As far as this show goes, you can... if you're watching it on YouTube, thank you. Give us a thumbs up and a subscription. That would be great. And if you're listening on iTunes, a 5-star and a review would be appreciated. We're also available on some other podcasting sites, really. Any site that can pick up an RSS feed or anything like that. So
Yep.
with that, thank you for tuning in, and you'll be in our hearts always.
Oh, nice.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.